So I got to tell you, Jennifer, I remember listening to you back with Van Earl on
Yeah,
WDFN, the Hammer.
absolutely. I know. I
uh,
remember it well. It's hard to imagine that was like, let's see, that was 94 when WDFN first went on the air, so 17 years ago almost in July.
Boy, that place has undergone some changes in that time, hasn't it?
Absolutely it has.
But they're still on the air, and we still tune them in once in a while. Jennifer, you're
Yep.
with Fox 2 in Detroit. You also work the sidelines for NFL games, and you followed this whole Michigan situation closely. I follow your Twitter account, and you had some interesting insight during that time. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you in. I want to talk to you about Rich Rodriguez for a second.
Okay.
Do you think that he had a fair opportunity in Ann Arbor to really
Well,
put his mark on it, or not?
I think that that is one of those questions that depending who you ask, you'll get a different answer. And since you're asking me, my answer is no. I don't think he got a fair shake. I mean, I really think that when he was hired, obviously the whole mishandling of the Les Miles interview situation had gone on. There's a lot of people, former players and Michigan faithful who were really lobbying hard for Les Miles to get the job. And then there was another contingent of people very close to the program who were not in favor of Les Miles. So it was really kind of a house divided when you look at that whole situation. And then what Bill Martin really did was go out and get the wow coach at the time. I mean, if you remember, Rich Rod really had a lot of things happening down at West Virginia, and he was kind of the sizzle, like Jim Harbaugh was almost
Right.
this time around. And I think that when he came in, he still kind of had that house divided. People, I don't want to say working against him. That makes it sound completely, contrition and all of that and the conspiracy theory. But I do think that there were a lot of people that thought, you know what, here's a guy from the South who doesn't really understand Michigan. And if you think about it, I mean, there's been so many former Michigan coaches that have come in. I mean, there haven't been that many Michigan coaches over time, actually, between Lloyd Carr, Gary Moeller briefly, and Bo. But it takes a little time to understand. And everybody talks about Brady Hoke being a Michigan man, which he is, but only because he was an assistant here for a while, for 8 years, and which is something, don't get me wrong. I mean, I think that has tremendous credibility with the fans, with the players, with everyone associated with the program, especially former players. But just the Rich Rod situation, it was just kind of ill-fated from the beginning, and there were a lot of times, he's kind of a gosh dang it kind of guy, where he would, but almost to his detriment, he's a really nice guy, but I just think there were a lot of things that he didn't fully understand, and I don't think he paid the proper respect to the Michigan State game and the Ohio State rivalry and the traditions that so many people who are dyed in blue, insist upon, and I think that just really turned people off. And then, of course, when you start losing, nothing ever goes your way.
He was quoted throughout the season. In fact, at one point, he kind of called out the press and said, "You guys are pretty smart. You tell me how many teams in this country are featuring as many young guys defensively as we are." And ultimately, the defense was his downfall. I mean, they're terrible again this year, and I think maybe if he could have turned that defensive side around a little bit sooner, maybe he could have gotten another year. Or was this going to be it regardless?
I guess David Brandon ultimately really only knows that fate. He contended prior to, or actually during the press conference when he announced Rich's firing, he said, "I did not make a decision prior to the bowl game. I waited to give him a chance. I wanted the kids to have their coach and have, the best possible chance to win that bowl game, and I wanted to see what would play out on the field." But ultimately, we all know what happened. They got whipped pretty well in that game, and I do think that the writing may have been on the wall prior to that. There were a lot of rumblings throughout the season, especially, the way they started out very well, but then they had so many issues. I mean, even in that Illinois game that they won, but they combined for 120-some points. I mean, you just can't have a defense like that in the Big Ten, and I don't know that he was willing to, part ways with his defensive coordinator. And if you look closely, one of the things that Brady Hoke did when he came in was he went out and got not only a Michigan guy in Greg Madison, but also a guy who's been a D coordinator in the college game and in the Big Ten, and as well for the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, talk about a wow factor in a defensive coordinator, and that's really the position that needs the most work. So I think Brady Hoke has made a lot of fans. I know he came in, probably with, maybe a 60% approval when he was hired.
Right.
The press conference probably put him to maybe 70, 75. Let's wait and see. You got to win games in addition to winning the press conference. But I think once he got Greg Madison in there, I think that completely convinced people, that he is serious about playing Big Ten smash mouth football and stopping the run and doing it the Michigan way, the quote-unquote Michigan way.
Jennifer, you covered we're speaking with Jennifer Hammond from Fox 2 in Detroit, kind enough to join us on the Time Out Show. You covered the coaching search carefully, and I heard it characterized as you did.
Endlessly.
Yes, some people called it a circus. I mean, the thing was a mess from the very beginning. I wonder how much of that was the media's perception and how much of it was actually reality.
I covered it very closely insofar as that I was out at Schembechler Hall each day that there was a rumor of a meeting with Rich Rod. That first, I believe it was a Tuesday afternoon, they said, he's going to meet with Rich Rod today, we think. So I went out there, and I was out there waiting in the parking lot, and looking at parking spots. Was his car here? Was Dave Brandon's car here? Was Rich Rod's car here? Where were the players? Rich Rod's wife, Rita, came. Oh, my gosh, what was her reaction? How did she look? Was she bummed out? It's crazy what we in the news media, do to a certain extent. But the Michigan program, as you know, is so high profile, and there are so many fans, not only just in Michigan, but across the country, if not the world. And that was probably one of the most high-profile stories I've covered. I could count on one hand, the most intense stories I've covered in my 16 years here in journalism in Detroit. And with good reason. I mean, it's a huge job. It was a huge deal. I do think that Dave Brandon went about it very methodically. He wanted to do it privately, but I think what he maybe didn't fully understand or he didn't embrace how much people care, that people want to know his every move on this. And I understand that he wants, that he doesn't want to splash it on the front page, who he's talking to, where he's going, what he's doing, when he's doing it, who's being offered what. But there were so many leaks, not so many, there were several leaks. The number, I don't know if you had heard it, I believe it was John Clayton from ESPN had leaked a figure, $5.2 million offered to Jim Harbaugh. And I asked specifically about that figure. I said, such a specific number from such a well-revered and respected guy like John Clayton, and he called it erroneous. He said that report's erroneous. And then he also, after he had hired Brady, he said this was Plan A all along, and which left a lot of people wondering, well, if this was Plan A all along, why didn't you do it sooner? Why are there all those reports out there about Les Miles and about Jim Harbaugh? And then even several days later, I believe it was in the Times-Picayune down in Louisiana, there was a report that said that Les Miles had been offered the job and turned it down. So, to what extent does Dave Brandon have egg on his face because he's standing up there telling lies? I don't know. But as a reporter, I don't fault him for wanting to keep it private. But I guess when things are out there, it kind of makes you look bad when you don't. He always talks about transparency. I believe that's a word that I've heard him use several times. And it just seemed to me that there wasn't a lot of transparency used during the coaching search.
Right.
But in the end, he's got a great guy. The press conference, like I said, went over well, and all signs point to maybe that Denard Robinson will stay, which will be a huge coup for Brady Hoke, because that was really the big question the first couple of days, actually the first day of Brady's press conference, and then by Thursday, the day after, he had said, that's it, I'm staying. But we'll see come time, spring, April, when they get out and play spring ball and we see what the offense is and what kind of opportunities and scheme fits all of the talents. Surely everybody knows that if Denard wanted to go somewhere else, there'd be a dozen or more schools, chomping at the bit big-time schools chomping at the bit to get him. So, I think a lot of things will play out here. But as far as the coaching search goes, I think just in the day and age of Twitter and social media, as much as it's, completely come off the hook, where you can know something in a minute, and everybody was on flight aware. I was out at the airport, actually. My station sent me out there one evening to greet Dave Brandon as he came in for Baton Rouge, because we had gotten word that he had met with Les Miles that evening. He was flying back to Ann Arbor, and that there was supposedly an offer on the table. And as it turns out, hearing this story from the Times-Picayune, and there very well probably was, or could have been, reportedly, allegedly there was. But, I felt kind of silly out there at the airport, but he was nice enough to stop, roll down his window, and I said, "Do you have a coach? Can you tell me anything?" And he said, "Hawaii was terrific." So he tried to keep a sense of humor. And even after the fact, at the press conference when he introduced Brady, I said to him, "Hey, I'm gonna stop stalking you now." And he said, "You know what? I fully respect what you did. You had a job to do, but I hope you understand I had a job to do."
I'm kind of a press conference junkie. I really enjoyed Brady Hoke's. The question asked of him was, is Michigan still an elite program? Is this an elite job? And his response was classic, and I've seen it posted everywhere you can post anything. And then, he kind of tangled with Drew Sharp, which was a good start for him, a good initiation into that world.
Right.
I thought he handled it perfectly. I don't think he could have handled it better. He came across as sincere. He loves the university. You had to, I assume you were there. It had to be kind of exciting and interesting to be part of that.
I was there, and it was exciting. And I try, I always maintain impartiality, and I really root for the best story. And I will tell you, as he stood at the podium, and with each word that, came out of his mouth, the story got better and better.
Right.
I mean, especially when he said, "I would have walked here."
Right.
And you know what? It wasn't just a line. I mean, he was absolutely genuine. And the fact that and a lot of people, even after the fact, I don't know if you heard any of the Kyle Turley
Yes, right.
comments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was pretty colorful. And it's, what you wouldn't expect any less from Turley, but it definitely, this has always been his dream job, and he has made no bones about it. And even if he was choice 2 or 3, he didn't let his ego get in the way of it. He definitely just embraced that he was getting the opportunity, and he knows, and what did he say? "I'm going to be here forever."
Mm-hmm.
It's all about the kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about Brady Hoke. He spoke of himself in the third person, which is always something we keep our eye out for in the media. But he said it's not about Brady Hoke.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the kids. And, of course, think of how many people he won over when he pounded emphatically on that podium and said, "There is no other game on our schedule bigger than that." And you notice he never put Ohio and State together.
I was going to say, I hope you don't say Ohio State.
No, he didn't say Ohio State. He didn't say Ohio State. He said, "No bigger game on our schedule than that one."
Jennifer Hammond's from Fox Sports or Fox 2 in Detroit. And Jennifer, you tweeted one night that John Gruden had interviewed for the job.
I did.
Did that come to pass? How did you find that information out?
I still haven't been able to get that out of Brandon yet. I got it from 2 sources, and I went with it because there were so many, tiny little pockets of interviews, and things going on places that you just never really knew. Because the way Dave Brandon did operate, really under the radar, he flew under the radar with that. And Gruden's people weren't saying anything, but I had 2 sources I trusted, so I went with it, and never did I hear anything more on it. But one of these days, I'm going to get Dave Brandon to tell me off the record, so I'll never be able to share it with you.
Yeah,
but in fact, he did, because there were a lot of interviews. He said, he went to, I believe it was 5 cities in 6 days, and he talked, to many candidates, and the fact that we only know about Les Miles, Jim Harbaugh, Fitzgerald, I believe, and Brady, and we're not even still sure of when he, in fact, met with Brady to make him the offer, but I know that he did call him on the phone to finally offer him the job. So, there was so much stuff out there, and Twitter makes it happen rapidly.
By the way, listeners tuning in to Jennifer Hammond from Fox 2 in Detroit, if you're not following Jennifer Hammond on Twitter, you're blowing it. If you love sports, it's awesome.
I'll give you a little plug. It's HAMR65.
HAMR65. What else are you covering right now for Fox 2 in Detroit?
Let's see. What did I do yesterday? Yesterday I actually went and did a story on Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He was at Wayne State University delivering a Martin Luther King tribute luncheon keynote speech, and he was terrific. It was really, really fun to meet him. It was the first time I'd ever met him, And he's an interesting guy, and certainly, I mean, his basketball prowess is legendary, and it was really fun. And I also enjoyed, I said to him as he was leaving the podium, because they said, "That's it, Mr. Abdul-Jabbar has to go over to another meet and greet, so we're going to wrap this up." And I said, "Well, no, I just need him to say Roger, Roger." And he leaned toward the microphone, and he just said, "We have clearance." And it was pretty classic. So I used a little airplane clip in my story. I think that's still on myfoxdetroit.com. You can check it out. But it was fun to do, and I'll be doing the Tigers Caravan kicks up on Friday. They probably come out your way, don't they?
Yeah, I think maybe to Jackson, maybe.
Yeah, I think they do come that way.
And, yeah, that'll be interesting.
And then they have the Comerica Park Tiger Fest on Saturday, and also the Red Wings play on Saturday. So we're just kind of getting into that, time period where I cover a little more college basketball and hockey and the Tiger stuff before they head down to Lakeland. And then, March kicks it all up with NCAA and the tournament. And
Jennifer, if you're going to be in sports journalism, this isn't a bad area to be in, is it?
It's, you know what, I have been so blessed. I've covered so many amazing things. It's crazy. And this is my home, really. I mean, I was born in Chicago and lived there until I was 10, and then grew up here, went to Western Michigan, actually, in Kalamazoo, and spent some time in Chicago after graduating from college. But since I've been back here in 94, I've covered a national championship in football with Michigan in 97. I was out there with them for 2 weeks. I've covered a couple or 3, 4 Final Fours. I've covered a Super Bowl, not that the Lions were in, but at Ford Field. I've been to a couple of Super Bowls in other states. I've been to New Orleans for a Super Bowl. I've covered a World Series with the Tigers. I've covered, 4 Stanley Cups, is it? 97, 98, 02, and 06, 07? I lose track. There's so many. But it's been really incredible. I mean, Detroit, I think, it rivals, any other place. I mean, I'm sure the people in Boston would like to argue with us, but and Philly, but we definitely are on the map here in Detroit with the riches of the sports teams locally.
Well, Jennifer, I can't thank you enough for coming on tonight. I always see you during the Lions games doing the sideline work for them. That's got to be an exciting gig for you.
It is. It's a thrill. That's my favorite thing, because I love the aspect of the live element, and I love being down on the field and just kind of watching the emotion of the game. And plus, I don't think people realize, I mean, you do. You know how hard-hitting football is, but I think with all of the instant replay and all of the things that kind of slow the game down so much, when you're standing down on the field and you see them go, helmet to helmet in the trenches, you realize how fast and how hard those guys hit. And
right.
It's a blast. The NFL is definitely my favorite to cover, but there's a lot of other good things going on here in Detroit.
Well, but before I let you go, last thing, the Lions fever down here just never ends. We talk Lions every week, all year long, 52 weeks a year.
It's amazing.
The 4-game winning streak at the end, should fans be optimistic about that? Was that fool's gold? I mean, what did you read into the end of the season?
I don't think it was fool's gold at all, because look at the teams they beat. I mean, they beat the Green Bay Packers, who are still playing. Even watching the Bears last weekend, or the first, couple of playoff games, I thought to myself, here's a team that they played so tight and so close, and they could be there. And I don't think I'll be going out on a limb when I say the Lions should expect to be in the playoffs next year. I think that's definitely an attainable goal. I think the fact that their defense played so well down the stretch at the end, they had eliminated penalties, they had done really well, spreading the ball around, and the fact that they did it with their second and third string quarterback all the way. If they get and keep Matt Stafford healthy, they've really got a lot of talent, and I think Ndamukong Suh is just something that every Lions fan, he's a terror on the field, is somebody that I think every single Lions fan should be thrilled about. And I have no doubt that Martin Mayhew and Jim Schwartz are in full control of what they want this team to be, where they're going to take it, and how they're going to move forward in the draft and in free agency. So I'm very optimistic. I mean, this is some of the best football I've seen them play, in the last 10 years. I mean, it's been a long time coming for Lions fans.
Boy, has it ever. It
fun
really has.
Team to cover, though. It's a fun team to cover, some great guys, and they're all sticking around for a while. And what can you say about, Dave Rayner, I think that's one of the best stories of of the season is how he stepped in. I mean, Jason Hansen's still a great kicker and a great guy, but he's no spring chicken, and I definitely think Dave Rayner has maybe made a name for himself and a place for himself on this team.
Jennifer Hammond, you can follow her on Twitter, HAMR65. Follow her like I do. Get all the scoops about what's going on. Also, myfoxdetroit.com. You can see some of her work. Jennifer, I can't thank you enough for being on tonight.
Hey, anytime. You know what? Call me when we get a little closer. I'm sure everybody's talking about a possible lockout here. So
all right,
call me anytime. I'll be covering Pistons when the trade goes down, whatever you need.